stone cold player, helping out with the homework. I'm an algebra slayer. Russell Carson's in the place without spilling my mug. If I tuck you in at night, you'll be as snug as a bug. Then I'm off in the morning to make that cheese. You may not know this yet, but it doesn't grow on trees. Now mama, take it please. One, take it.
I'm dropping timers like a hot patty, training on my tots, washing all the pins and pots, tying little shoes and knots, giving knowledge to your brain like if your friendship off the train. You don't have to do the same, now get your toys out of the rain. I'm cleaning every spittle, cutting coupons like a bill. If you need parental skill, now you know where you're for real. You don't think our rhymes are ill, boy? Then you're grounded for a mill.
Mom, she's a gent, making us chill when we get you fed, telling us to share and never to hit. If you can't say something nice, put a sock in it.
Dad, he's the guy, never gets tired of playing I Spy with a constant barrage of kids asking why, and he always pretends he needs another tie.
You know money doesn't grow on trees. Why buy the cow if the milk is free? This won't hurt you as much as it hurts me. If you want dessert, eat another veggie. Close that door, you weren't born in a stable. Sit up straight and kiss your enemy. Close your mouth when you chew. Get your elbows off the table. Mom and dad at the ear, check it. That's the label.
It's the parent rap, y'all.
And it's a parent.
We're great parents. Mom and daddy in the house.
Mom and daddy own the house. Mom and daddy need to clean the house.
Keep your hands to yourself, boy. Don't make me stop this beat. I'll do it. I'll pull this beat right over.
That was Brother Tony's pick, by the way. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers, and we'll recognize you again before the service is over, but it is Father's Day, of course, and we're thankful for all the fathers. If you could stand, please, and open your songbook to song number 89. Song number 89, we're going to sing this morning, Mansion Over the Hilltop.
And
of you to New Hope Baptist Church. And at the risk of embarrassing somebody, there's somebody special that just came in. Miss Whitney. Praise the Lord. If you don't know about Miss Whitney, she had lung and kidney transplants. And so that was several weeks ago, and she is finally back from Dallas. And so praise the Lord that she is able to be here. But we are delighted that each and every one of you are here this morning. And if you are visiting with us for the first time, I want to invite you to fill out this contact card that you will find attached to your bulletin. And you can tear that off and drop it in the offering plate at the end of the service. We might have a record of your visit, or if there's just some way in which we can help you, you feel free to use that contact card if you have a concern or a prayer request or any way in which we can help you, and put that in the offering plate at the end of the service, and we will get it and handle that accordingly. But thank you so much for being here this morning. You can remain seated on this song and turn to song number 327. Song number 327, I thirsted in the barren land of sin and shame, springs of living water. Sing it out this morning. I thirsted in the barren land of sin and shame, and nothing satisfying there I found. Unto the blessed cross of Christ one day I came, where springs of living water did abound. Drinking at the springs of living water, happy man am I, my soul is satisfied. Drinking at the springs of living water, oh wonderful and bountiful supply. How sweet the living water from the hills of God, it makes me glad and happy all the way. Now glory, grace, and blessing mark the path I've trod. I'm shouting hallelujah every day. Drinking at the springs of living water, happy now am I, my soul is satisfied. Drinking at the springs of living water, oh wonderful and bountiful supply. Oh sinner, won't you come today to Calvary? A fountain there is flowing deep and wide. The Savior now invites you to the water free, where thirsting spirits can be satisfied. Drinking at the springs of living water, happy now am I, my soul is satisfied. Drinking at the springs of living water, oh wonderful and bountiful supply. Amen. Don't close your book. Number 345 as we stand together. Number 345, what a friend we have in Jesus. What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God
Amen. Good to see everybody this morning, and happy Father's Day again. And there's a couple recognitions that we want to make this morning. First of all, if you weren't here last week, you may wonder why the platform looks a little empty and things look a little weird up here. That's because you didn't get to see what was up here last week, or the auditorium and building in general. Last week it looked like a castle. And we had Castle VBS all over the auditorium, and we had a great VBS last week. It was crazy busy, but we thank the Lord for VBS, and I want to recognize all the workers that helped in VBS. If you helped work in VBS, if you would please stand and be recognized. Do it now. Don't make me point out how to do it. Thank you so much. And there are, you can maybe see there are others who were waiting for after VBS to go on vacation, so they spooled up, and we thank the Lord for them. Also want to recognize our fathers today and the importance of that job. We just had Mother's Day, and we also want to recognize that Father's Day is one credit card payment cycle after Mother's Day, and let you ladies know that that did not escape our attention, but we do want to honor the fathers today, and so we have a gift for you. I think our guys have that and ready to pass it out. So if you are a father, please raise your hand. Or have ever been one? If you are a father today, please raise your hand. We want to give you a gift. We want you not to play with it during church. Brother Scott picked these out. He always picks a gift out that are appropriate. This is some sort of Rambo pen that if you get lost in the wilderness or in some sort of concentration camp, you can break out and start a fire and I don't know what all, some sort of something or another. I'm not sure what all that thing does. So, but anyway, thank you, Brother Scott, for helping us with that. He always does such a good job in that. We just want to thank you for being put those things in your pockets. I said they are playing already, Brother Scott. We're going to have to do this at a different time. Anyway, we just really want to thank you so much. And I would like to, before we dismiss Children's Church, I would just like to take time this morning and pray for our fathers. And I know that that is a difficult job. And so let's go, Lord, in prayer together. Our God and Father, Lord, we thank you so much for being a good father to us. Lord, for being the ultimate example of what fatherhood is and what it should be. Lord, we thank you for those fathers, Lord, who have chosen in their life to follow you and to set an example for those children who are looking up to them, Lord, as to what a father ought to be. And Lord, I pray that you would strengthen us who know you, Lord, and our fathers to be that kind of father that we ought to be. Lord, so that when our children come behind us, they'll know how to live, where to go, what to do with their lives, Lord, what is important in this life. Lord, I just thank you again for these fathers. Lord, I just pray that you strengthen them for the task ahead. We love you and we thank you in your precious name. Amen. Again, it is good to see Miss Whitney back there. And yeah, you can clap for her now. Do me a favor, do not hug her neck. Do not shake her hand. The fact of the matter is, Miss Whitney, would you stick a hand up? Would everybody else stick a hand up and do like this? All right, you shook hands with Miss Whitney. She doesn't need you to give her your germs, please, not right now. So just kind of, we love her, and but we don't want to transfer any of your cooties to her right now. So double lung transplant is a big deal, and it was over 6 months ago. So as Brother Carl, her father, is making his way for the scripture reading, Children's Church, you are dismissed. You may go. Children's Church, you may go.
good to be in the house of the Lord this morning, amen? Especially for us. I feel like we've been gone forever. But me and my wife really appreciate all the prayers, the support, mostly the prayers. I know all of y'all don't know everything that went on, and I still don't know everything that went on. But, you know, we were at a point where, you know, the doctors couldn't do anything else for me, but God could. Our scripture reading this morning is in Joshua 4, chapter 4, verse 4 through 7. So Joshua called the 12 men from whom he had appointed from the sons of Israel, one man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, cross again to the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan, and each of you take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Israel. Let this be a sign among you, so that when your children ask later, say, what do these stones mean to you? Then you shall say to them, because the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, when it crossed the Jordan. The waters of the Jordan were cut off, so these stones shall become a memorial to the sons of Israel forever. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for this day that we have, Lord, to come into your house and worship and to praise you. Lord, I pray that you'll bring to Brother Tony as he brings the message on this Father's Day, and I pray that you'll bless all the fathers that are here today and their families, and their fathers will lead and guide their families in the way that you would have them to. I ask all these things in your precious name.
this morning, the importance of Father's Day as it has to do with the Christian walk and the Christian life can't be overstated. Because the impact that you can have in somebody's life is first of all considerable, but it is limited. And this is why we are going to talk today about 12 stones. 12 stones that we read about in Joshua chapter number 4 and verse number 47. Now what had happened was, it had come time finally for the children of Israel to go into the land of Canaan. And as they go into the land of Canaan, they come to the Jordan River that at this time of the year would have been flooded. And so they would have had trouble getting 2 to 3 million people across the Jordan River. And so God in his mercy and his power again says, hey, I got this handled. So he backs up the Jordan River, and again the children of Israel, like they did in the Red Sea, walk across on dry ground. And the priests are standing out there with the Ark of God, the presence of God, this symbol of the presence of God, in the middle of where this Jordan River was once flowing. The children of Israel are passing by. Once they all pass by, God says, hey, Joshua, I want you to tell the people, pick one man out of each of the tribes to represent all the people of the tribes and go back and get the biggest stone they can pick up. And I want them to get that stone, put it on their shoulder, bring it back, and I want them to stack those stones up as an altar, as a picture to me and for me to represent what has happened here and what is happening in their lives. So that one day when their children come back and they see these stones and the children say, hey, what's that pile of rocks about? You'll be able to say, one day, let me tell you what happened one day. Right now in Jackson, Mississippi, I have another grandparent. My dad called me this morning and said, will probably not live through the day. And here's what happens basically in life. In life, we have a limited amount of time to impact people's lives. When we were over there at their house the last time, they were saying, hey, get everything you want out of this house. And they were wanting to give us all their stuff. And that's a weird deal. Listen, I don't want any of your stuff. It's just kind of odd and it's weird, but they want you to have this stuff. And as you go through and as they're going through their stuff, you see things that remind you of things that your children really don't know anything about. But it reminds you of a grandmother that worked the majority of her life at Frito-Lay. You see things that remind you of when you were young. You used to go over there and she would work at Frito-Lay, and your grandfather who worked at a trucking company, and you can see stuff, and he loved to hunt and do different things. And I have a 30-30 rifle at the house that was his, a Winchester that I wouldn't give the world for. And somebody was mentioning some of the fishing stuff on my wall this morning, and I wouldn't give for it. Why? Because it means something to me. That stuff tells a story. Tells a story that really that a lot of people wouldn't understand. And after I'm gone, probably the pile of rocks that I've accumulated from people that I love won't mean much to anybody else, which is why we want to really talk about taking the time that God's given us in this life and really leaving a pile of rocks that when our children see it, when we've done what we could do, and our children see what we've left, that pile of rocks which we've left, they can say, that was important. That was significant. And that means something. And that's something I can do. There are 3 basic things that they were teaching when they left those 12 rocks. And I'm sure later on, somebody probably came by and just kind of kicked them over. Somebody who later on, generations later, it even talks about, and they are there to this day. I'm sure somebody reads and thought, man, I'd like to go see them. Probably not there at this day, the day that was written. I'm sure somebody's gone by and just for meanness' sake, kicked them over. Why? Because they don't mean anything to somebody who would see them today, just like a pile of rocks. But the question we're going to answer today, what should be a couple things that you and I leave behind when we leave our pile of rocks? There are three basic things I just want to kind of encourage you as a father and you just as an individual. Listen, even if you're a guy who doesn't end up having kids, or a woman who doesn't have kids, or whatever your situation in life, there are still some things that you can leave behind that you can point people to that's very important. And here are a couple of those things that we can all leave behind, but these rocks meant to people. So that one day when the children said, what does that mean? They said, here's what it means. First of all, number one, when we leave those things behind, our children should be able to see your society. And we say your society because over and over in verse number 2, verse number 4, verse number 5, Joshua kept using the word tribe. If you use the King James, it says tribe. Take one man out of each tribe, or out of the group of people. There were 12 tribes that went with the children of Israel. There were a tribe and a half or 2.5 tribes that stayed on the other side of Jordan to graze their cattle. The tribe of Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh. But still they went over with the children of Israel to fight. And then after the fighting was all done, they went back. They had another pile of rocks, which was very interesting, which we don't have time to talk about this morning. You'll have to read the book. It's awesome. But anyway, they all went across and they assembled these rocks, and so all these tribes, what is the tribe? What does it really represent? What it really represents, each tribe, he says, when you look at this, you're looking at something that happened with your people. One of the things that we've kind of lost today is a sense of who we are. The big story about how do we get to where we are and what does it mean to be where we are. When they were talking about their tribe, they were talking about a story that they had been through, the big picture story, our history. What have we learned? Yesterday, Brother Carl was telling me about some business things that their company had been through and tried, and then as the years go on, they just seem to repeat and they keep doing what hadn't been working. Anybody else worked at a company like that? I know I worked at a company one time and we did that in the inventory department. We would get things straightened out, then another guy over inventory would come in and he would go back to what didn't work. I'm like, why are we making that same mistake again? Right? What he's basically saying is, tell the story of your life, the big picture story of your life to your children. Do they know what life's about because of how you lived? The tribe story, the big story. These rocks told the story about, listen, we wasn't always here. We set these up so we can tell a story about the idea that we hadn't always been here, that there was this story that got us from where we used to be to where we are. How did that go? Well, the Bible talks about in Deuteronomy in chapter number 32 and verse number 7, remember the days of old. Don't forget where you came from. Don't forget how you got to where you are. I love the guy who said, remember, you're unique, just like everybody else. You have a similar story to everybody else's story. How did you get to where you are? Remember the days of old. Consider many years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he'll show thee thy elders, and they will tell thee. When the Most High divided the nations, their inheritance, and separated the sons of Adam. He's talking about here in Deuteronomy again. He's telling the children of Israel, he says, remember what used to be. Remember when God separated the sons of men. Remember when he took Abraham out of Ur of the Chaldees. And then there was Abraham, and he had a son named Isaac, and Isaac had a son named Jacob. Remember all the things that Jacob went through, and how Jacob and Esau had their struggles, and Jacob had his name changed to Isaac, and Isaac had a son named Joseph. He actually had 12 sons, and they were the 12 tribes of Israel. And Joseph went to Egypt, and then because of a famine, everybody ended up moving to Egypt. And then remember how the Egyptians took advantage of them, and the children of God multiplied there and became this great nation. And then remember how Moses came and said, hey, we're going to leave here. And then there was all this problem. That was their story. That was the big story of how they got to where they are. But what is it that we try to teach our children in the things that we are accumulating in this life? How many times and how much time do we spend telling the big story about who we really are? About the history of our life and what life really means. The 4 quintessential worldview questions of who am I? How did I get here? Why am I here? And where am I going? Recently, my daughter, within the last 2 years, my daughter and my son both got married and moved out. Hooty hoo. Right? No tears here. Okay, my wife and I were talking about it yesterday. I'm like, man, this is awesome. We love our children dearly. We love for them to come over. They just need to call because they're visitors. It is wonderful. Love to see my kids. I love to spend time with my kids. But I remember when Rachel and I was just Rachel and I. We used to sing them a song when they were little, when we would go out on a date and not carry them. Because we were making a plan. We've been married 28 years now. We were making a plan to be alone one day. We used to sing them a song that said, how'd the song go? She's my dear mother. She's your dear mother. I know that it's true, but she was my sweetheart before there was you. Right? Right? We're going on a date, and no, you can't come. Right? So we're going to walk by the lake, we're going to hold hands, we'll write our names in the wet sand. We'll write sweet I love you, send them off in a bottle. And in memory of you, we will eat at McDonald's. I know you're wondering how I could be so heartless to want just your mother and me. She's your dear mother, I know that it's true, but she was my sweetheart before there was you. And so we would sing him that song before we'd go out on a date. And I was cleaning out my son's room the right way, the way he should have done before he left. I mean, scorched earth, getting rid of everything. It all must go, liquidation. And I came across something that kind of stopped me in my tracks. It was the Bible story book that I used to read to my son and daughter. You know what I loved most about it? We had gone through it so many times, the cover was gone, front and back. I thought, there are some stones right there that we stacked up. I don't know how many times we went through that Bible story book. I don't know how many times they said we didn't read a Bible story yet. But those are times where you accumulate stones and you stack up stones that tell the big story about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And this is why we are who we are. I mean, I can tell you the story about a family that puts the funk in dysfunction if you want to. But the real story of our history starts with God and how He brought us to where we are. So the story that we tell when we accumulate things in this life, and there's nothing wrong with enjoying the family time and all that stuff, and when we go through pictures and we see things and we remember the memories that we have with our family, we often talk about the trips and which one was their favorite and which one was our favorite, and that's all good stuff, but the real stuff that matters is the big picture stuff. So when you accumulate stuff in this life, and even today, make sure that you're accumulating some things that are of substance, the big picture stuff, society stuff, or we might say history stuff. George Orwell said, the most effective way to destroy a people is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of their own history. If you want to destroy a people, then obliterate their own history to where they don't know it. Where they don't remember where they came from and why they're there. Edmund Burke said those who know history, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. George Bernard Shaw said we learn from experience that people don't learn from experience. We understand that very seldom do we step back and look at the big picture stuff, who we are, why we're here. Jeremiah 6:16 says, thus saith the Lord, stand ye in the way and see and ask for the old paths. Where's the good way? And walk therein. Look at the things in your life that work and have real meaning and do it. Don't forget to accumulate the things that are important and significant. The second thing that they should see when they look at the things that we are leaving behind and have left behind is our personal story. It's great that we have a family story. It's great that God has done all of these things to redeem mankind. But it's a whole other thing when God can see that He has redeemed you. One of the things that I love about my fact matters, I was telling somebody my personal testimony this morning, and I can't tell my testimony of salvation without telling the testimony of my father, because that's really the marked place where it started. Because there's no doubt that if my dad had not yielded to the leading of the Holy Spirit when someone sent a pastor to our house, when things were just falling apart in our family, if he hadn't yielded to that draw of the Holy Spirit because of that visit at our house on that day, then it is very likely that things would have been, it is absolute that things would have been different in my own life. That's how I came to know Christ. Because of my dad's story. My dad's story, my story directly connected. The 5 testimonies that we did in the last sermon series from people in these pews, every one of them had something to do, either positive or negative, with the influence of their parents. Their stories influenced in their lives. Go to the baseball park and watch a kid. Watch him strike out and see where his head turns. Ordinarily not to his coach. Ordinarily to mom and dad. When good or bad, watch them in their house when they're about to do something they know they're not supposed to do. And you ever been there and watched them when they were about to touch something they weren't supposed to touch? What do they do? They're looking around for you. Why? Because you're the biggest influence in their life. Your story directly impacts their story. So, when you're living your life, you have to understand that your children's head is on a pivot, and what you do matters greatly to them. When you pile up things in your life, when you take the effort and put forth the labor to do things in your life, understand that people are watching and they are learning what's important by what you do. This is how we live life. This is how you treat a spouse. This is what you invest your time and effort and heart into. You don't have to say it with your words. You're writing a gospel, a chapter each day by the things that you do, by the words that you say. People read what you write, whether faithful or true. Say, what is the gospel according to you? Your story. It's a personal story. Everyone is different. Notice in verse number 5, and Joshua said unto them, pass over before the ark. You see, these people, their story didn't just say Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Their kids were like, you knew Abraham? Nope. But let me tell you what I did know. Let me tell you what my story was, son. You see, God brought his people to the promised land. And they looked in the promised land, and God said, you can take it. And the people said, no, we're scared, we won't do it. And because of disobedience, God forced his people to wander 40 years till everyone who wouldn't go because of disobedience died. And I've been in the wilderness all of this time. And now I was able, because of obedience, to come over this Jordan and now to conquer God's enemies and take this land because of obedience and because of the graciousness of God. And that's why you and I today live in the promised land. That was their story. That was the meaning of the rocks that had been stacked up. This personal story of we had been obedient. Our fathers were disobedient and wouldn't go into the land of promise. But we were willing to trust God with our lives. It's a personal story. What are your kids going to say about the importance of eternity based on you? That personal story. That family story. Again, those stories are directly connected. Listen to what the Bible says in verse number 6. And this may be a sign among you that when your children ask their father, and don't make any mistake about it, they will. They will. They'll ask. Even if they ask silently, by looking, by watching. My dad and his dad were estranged for years. When they were reunited, we went over to their house in Brandon, Mississippi, to my grandfather's house, and it was eerie. They sat alike. They had the same mannerisms. It was just spooky looking. It's amazing how fathers and children, how children look at fathers, and how children become parents. Where are you? These stories are connected. This is what Ephesians chapter number 6, verse number 4 says, Fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but raise them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Some of you have boats that you know what I'm talking about when I use the word nurture. You scratch your boat on a stump, your heart starts racing. And you can't wait to get it back to the docks. You can look under there and see what kind of damage you did. And you buff it out. You'll carry it to the shop. You make sure that thing's shining. That's nurturing. That's the kind of nurture that we're called to give to our children, where we're trying to get them from point A to point B. That's that godly leadership. And so I'm trying to help you become something. I'm trying to help you to be something. Don't provoke them to wrath, but have a goal in mind to get them from point A to point B. What is it exactly you want your children to be? What is it exactly we're trying to do with our lives? You see the same picture in Proverbs chapter number 3 and verse number 12. For whom the Lord loves, he corrects, even a father the son whom he delights. Solomon gave this testimony in Proverbs 4:1. Hear ye children the instruction of a father, and attend to no understanding. Solomon is talking to his children. For I give you good doctrine, and forsake not my law. For I was my father's son, tender and only beloved in the sight of my mother. My father loved me enough to teach me good wisdom, to teach me what life was really about. And that is what you and I are piling up stones to do. To teach our children what life is really about and what really matters. It's a personal story. It's a family story. And if it's a story about what God has done in your life, it's a miraculous story. When they looked at this pile of stones, what did they see? They see, Dad, what was it like over in the wilderness when God was feeding you with manna every day? You're telling me that bread rained from heaven every day? You're telling me your shoes didn't wear out for 40 years? Come on. Yep. Son, it was bigger than that. The waters of the Jordan backed up, and 2.5 to 3 million people walked across on dry ground. And then when we got across, we fought the biggest city first. And we didn't know how we were going to defeat it. It was a city called Jericho. When we got there, the Lord's plan was for us to march around it. And then to scream and blow trumpets. And the walls fell flat. Miracle after miracle after miracle. You see, when you come in personal contact with a miraculous God, miraculous things begin to happen in your family. It can happen. God intends to break the chains and break the bonds of this world through His Son, Jesus Christ, in your personal story, in your family, so that your family becomes a testimony of a miraculous story that when people hear it, they're like, what?
Amen.
What? Even to this day, my dad went back to his class reunion. And even to this day, people are like, no way. There is no way that happened. When my dad went to a church and told them that he was a preacher, they said no. Not that he wasn't a preacher, but no, he was not allowed. You know what he told them? I'm going to be a preacher if you sign those papers or not. They were like, we've got to have a meeting. We've never had anybody say that. They didn't care if we signed the ordination papers or not. You know what they said? We might as well sign him. He's going to do it anyway. That's how my dad became a pastor. Amazing. the miraculous things that God can do, from taking the guy in town that everybody knew as the town drunk, as the guy who was an alcoholic, and the guy who was abusive toward his family and neglectful toward his family, and God miraculously changes him and his whole family and does something incredible, miraculous, and God does the same thing with everyone he encounters. Can you tell your children, let me tell you what God has done in my life? To the place to where your child, like me, I used to say, I cannot wait to get old enough. That's why I got married when I was 18. That's why I tell people, don't do that. It's a bad idea. Okay? You're not ready. But I was just like, I'm getting out of here, man. My dad is nuts. He may not always be right, but he is never confused. I am leaving. I am going, and there's a big old world out there, and I'm going to go get me some. And Rachel and I, about at the same time, about 2 or 3 months after we've been married, looked at each other. We were in a situation we probably shouldn't have been in. We just kind of looked at each other, and we didn't even speak a word. But we both knew where we were going from that point. We had both experienced what the Lord had to offer, and we had had everything we wanted from the world. We were like, that's enough. I've seen what it was the funniest thing. And I'll tell you, I wish to goodness that people could live some of that experience to where you weren't allowed to experience any of the world, and then you went out into the world. Because it's a discouraging thing. If you don't know anything about the world, and you had never really experienced any of the world, and then you go straight out into it, it is completely discouraging. We were in a club where we were when we looked at each other. The most disappointed I'd ever been, I think, at that time. And because I'd never been in a dance club before. And the only thing I'd ever seen about dance was what I'd seen when I was a little kid, when there was 3 channels plus the little USB, whatever it was, the little channels with all the numbers on the bottom, on Saturday morning after cartoons. And you could watch Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, WWF Wrestling, or Soul Train. So all I'd ever seen about dancing was Soul Train. So her best friend was having this after rehearsal dinner thing at some club, and we were up on this top thing. They were like, can you dance? I was like, no, I've seen Soul Train, right? So we went and leaned over this thing, and I'm looking down there, and I'm like, no way. And I told my friend, I said, I can't dance, but I can do anything they're doing. Anything. That's horrible. I mean, I was horribly disappointed. One of her people, she thought she was really good. You ever seen that person who thought that was really good? The only time really I'd ever been there. So this is my whole experience. I'm giving it all to you right now. Dance like Thelma off Good Time. And I was like, does she know she's in public? No way this is happening live. Man, if I'd had a cell phone back then, we'd watch it right now on the big screen. I was like, no way. And I even went down there and danced. They were like, where'd you learn to dance? I'm like, you're horrible. But Rachel and I, we were like, no. We're just going to do something different with our lives. We want our kids one day to see in what we've assembled in our lives. When they look at what we've left, and they look at what we did in our lives and the time that we've spent, when they look back at the memories, we want them to see our society and how we got, the big story, kind of how we got to where we are. And then we want them to see our personal story of how it had to do with our family and how it had to do with the things that we did and how we poured life and how that God did miraculous things in our family and made us who we are. I love some of the things they can look back on and some of the things that they missed in our family. I remember in my mom and dad, I can remember going to a family one time to spend the night, one of the first times I wanted to spend the night, and realized that there were people who yelled at one another. My mom and dad decided they were going to do Christian stuff. When my dad got saved, he went home and threw everything in the house that he didn't think looked like Jesus. He didn't have any idea what looked like Jesus, what didn't. He's like, nope, I don't think that's what Jesus people do. I mean, he cleaned house. And it was like, we're not yelling at each other. We're not do that. Mom and dad, they don't do that to each other. And so I remember the first time I went over to somebody's house and they raised their voice. I had to come get rescued. I had to get a phone. You didn't have cell phones back then. I had to say, can I use the phone? And then, of course, they were standing there listening. So I had to, like, cover it. Come get me. And they're like, Mom, what's wrong? I don't know. I don't know. But they holler about everything. These people are mad. I don't know what happened. Just hurry. They hollered at supper. They hollered at every situation was hollering. This weird over here. Come get me. I don't know. There might be a killing. I don't know. But it was just weird because there were things I didn't experience. I thank the Lord that when I look at my mom and dad's story, and it's not like they were perfect, but there are some things that I can see that look like Jesus. And as I remember it, I want to be able to say the things they assembled in their lives were miraculous things that don't look like the world. Can you say there's some miraculous things in your life? Your society, how we got to where we are? Your story, and lastly, if they don't see anything else, they need to be able to see the Savior. When those children walked by those stones that were stacked up, and they said, what are those? They said, I got to tell you this story. Man, you got to hear this story. There was a God that brought us out of Egypt. There was a God who made a nation. There was a God who carried us through the wilderness and did miraculous things to get us to where we are and won great victories and did great things in our hearts and our lives. You're not going to believe this story. And it also says you're not going to believe what He can do for you. God is the answer. He has done great things, is doing great things, and will do great things. Because don't make any mistake about it. Everybody in here is looking for answers. The world is looking for answers. Those stones said, we know the answer. They could be sitting at the table. Mom and Dad, why is life so hard? Listen, life is going to be hard, but remember those stones over by the Jordan? They should remind us that God is able to carry us through difficult situations. The Bible says in verse number 5, and Joshua said to them, pass over before the ark of the Lord your God. Remember that this river didn't, I love to see when Discovery Channel does some ignorant story on miracles of the Bible. You ever seen one of those? Lazarus wasn't dead, he was in a coma. It's still a miracle that Jesus told him to get him out of the tomb and unwrap him, even though he was dead. We're trying to explain. They didn't cross the Red Sea. They crossed the Reed Sea. It was only ankle deep. Well, He drowned the whole army of Pharaoh in it. Now there's a miracle for you. Give me a break, man. You can't twist it around. God does miraculous things. Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse number 4, we're going to close with this. Verse number 4 says, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy might. And these words which I command thee, listen, Mom, listen, Dad. Here's the command for parents. And these words which I command thee shall be in thine heart. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children. And thou shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. My children have often accused me of preaching sermons at every situation. I said, every situation is a sermon. You know what the Bible says? The Bible says in the book of Proverbs, Proverbs is one of my favorite books. Proverbs says, God is awesome. Wisdom cries without. She utters her voice in the street. You know what she says according to Proverbs chapter number 1? And she cries, "How long will you simple ones love simplicity? Scorners delight in your scorning and fools hate knowledge." You know what she's saying? Everywhere you look at it, everywhere you look in the streets, you see God's wisdom. My kids and I, everywhere we used to look, I used to say, "See, I told you God was right." That is not going to work. Not in a box, not with a fox, not here or there, not anywhere. Do you see God's right? You can see it all over the world that God is right. Situations that will not work. You've seen it in friends and families and in your own lives where wisdom is screaming, "Hey, bro, you looking or you paying attention?" You ever done that to yourself where you hurt yourself and you said, "I knew I was going to do that"? Wisdom screaming everywhere. But especially in terms of where God says, "This is how I design life. This is how I mean it to work." She's uttering her voice in the street. Deuteronomy says, "Teach this to your children everywhere you go. Let it be everything that happens in your life. Let it be an illustration of how God is doing what God said He could do." Teach them diligently, the Bible says, to your children. Talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, when thou walkest by the way, when thou liest down, when thou risest up. Thou shalt bind them as signs upon thine hand, when as frontlets before thine eyes. Thou shalt write them upon the post of thine house and on thy gates. They shall be, and it shall be when the Lord thy God shall have brought thee into the land which He sware unto your fathers," talking about the promised land, "to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to give thee the good riches which thou buildest not, houses full of goods, which thou fillest not, wells digged, which thou diggest not, vineyards and olive trees, which thou plantest not. Then, or when thou have eaten to the full, then beware, lest thou forget the Lord, which brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage." The question is this: as fathers, as mothers, as just people in general, when you've accumulated everything in this life you're going to accumulate, when people look at your pile of rocks, they're going to see what? They're going to say what? They're going to say, "Here was what was important. This is what life's about right here." What will be left when you've left? There'll be a bunch of fishing stuff hanging on somebody's wall, who when I'm gone, nobody will care. You can't use that fishing stuff today. What will be said and done when all is said and done in your life? And when everything is accumulated, and everything is said and done, when everything is piled up that you've left, that pile of rocks will say what? Your kids will say what about you? I do funerals all the time. As musicians come, and I'm tasked with reading the obit. Here's what we do when we write an obituary. We try to sum up someone's life. It's amazing how short they are, isn't it? Last time you read an obit, they did this, they were born here, they lived, they worked here, they graduated here, and they died. I did a pre-needed Welch funeral home. Wrote my own obit. Because I'll be doggone at my funeral if that's how my obit reads. Because friend, that is not what my life is about. He was born, he made a little money, and he left. Are you kidding? That is a sorry pile of rocks right there. Somebody was asking me about funerals and cremation and all that stuff. I said, listen, in my death, I want to do the same thing that I did in my life, and that is point people to Jesus. I don't care what my children do financially. I hope they do well. That's my hope. But my real hope with my children is they know what life's about. By the way, if you'll teach your children how to live, they'll know how to make a living. How many times have you seen people whose abilities carry them further than their character could keep them? Teach people what life is really about when you accumulate your pile of rocks. Maybe today you don't know the Lord. Maybe you are not being guided through this life by Him. Maybe that's your first step today. Maybe there's another next step. Maybe there's another rock that needs to be put on your pile of rocks. Maybe it's church membership. Maybe it's baptism. Maybe you need to put the first one of salvation. I don't know what's going on in your life, but I'm telling you there's some things in this life that are more important than others. That people are going to look at, people are going to examine, that your kids are looking at even right now. The Bible tells us to examine ourselves. Let's stand together. Lord, we love you. What a wonderful God you are. Thank you so much for offering to lead us through this life. Lord, I'm offering to know us personally. Lord, we love you. We thank you, Lord God, for what you're doing in this life. Thank you for allowing us to lead a life of value, of meaning. Lord God, I pray that when our children look at us, that they see what's important. May it be authentic. May it be real. May we lead them to the right way, the way that they should go. We love you. We thank you for your word. Just pray that during this time of invitation, we'd be honest with ourselves about where we're going and what we're doing in this life. May our kids look up to us and see the truth in your precious name. Amen. Brother Scott.